BLOCKTV. It's time now for Chain Breakers, where we talk to the people that are the forefront of the blockchain and digital assets industry. Today we have with us in the studio Nate Hinman, Head of Growth at Bancor Protocol, to talk about the latest moves of Bancor into the DeFi space. Nate, firstly, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, so now you've got a big airdrop coming up. We're talking January 1st. There's going to be a whole process underway, but rather than me try and break it down, Nate,
Sure.
break it all down for us. What does this process mean? How's it going to play out? Give us all the details.
Sure. So I guess when you think of kind of airdrops, at least for me, it's some people think of a sort of spammy marketing tactic. What's this random token, this token that just landed in my wallet? So this airdrop is pretty unique because it's essentially fundamentally changing the structure of the Bancor Protocol. And here's how it's doing that. Bancor is taking 10% of the market cap of BNT and airdropping it to all BNT holders. So that's roughly 60,000 users. And the token that's being airdropped is a token called ETH-BNT. And ETH-BNT represents a sort of liquidity share in the ETH-BNT liquidity pool. So it will collect fees from all ETH-based trades on Bancor. So the asset will just automatically generate fees in a user's wallet. They can hold it. They can shift liquidity into another liquidity pool on Bancor, or they can convert it into any token in the network like ETH or EOS. And so this is really pushing towards this vision of user-owned exchanges.
Right.
Bancor will shift from a protocol with roughly 200 to 300 liquidity providers into a protocol with over 60,000 liquidity providers. So we're decentralizing our liquidity sources, and we're pretty thrilled about it. So all you need to do is hold BNT before January 1st at midnight. So right at New Year's, be holding BNT. There's a snapshot of all BNT holders.
That's Eastern Standard Time, by the way.
Yep, sorry, that's Eastern Standard Time, right at midnight. And over the course of the following days, ETH-BNT will land in your wallet, and it will be worth 10% of your BNT holdings. Right.
I mean, that's a pretty staggering development to be taken there, and one I think seems in some ways reasonably unparalleled throughout the history of the crypto industry. But talk me through as well, I'm interested to know, because in part of this liquidity development and airdrop that you guys are doing, you're changing some of the notions of the inflationary nature of the Bancor Protocol, as far as I understand, and in terms of the overall governance structure. Break that down a little bit for our viewers.
Yeah, so Bancor is essentially pushing towards this vision of DEXs as DAOs, decentralized exchanges as decentralized autonomous organizations, where the members essentially contribute work in the form of liquidity. And they can generate fees off of trade volume on the Bancor network. So say I want to stake, say I own certain tokens, let's say BAT tokens, I can stake those tokens inside the BAT liquidity pool on Bancor, and then generate a fee off of each BAT conversion that occurs on Bancor.
Right.
So it's this push towards sort of giving the exchange back to the people, the users, having an exchange with its liquidity sources decentralized across an unlimited number of unaffiliated users, and having the incentive for the users be the trade volume. So they generate fees autonomously.
Right.
And at the core of this sort of innovation is something called liquidity pools. And liquidity pools essentially allow us to automate the core operations of an exchange. The listing of tokens, the order matching for trades, and also the circulation of trading fees to liquidity providers. And this can all happen without a centralized entity controlling any of those processes. And so this is really the true vision that we see for decentralized exchanges.
So I want to break this down a little bit deeper though, because I mean, you talk about the advantages of your model as a liquidity pool, but let's talk about that in comparison to the traditional centralized exchange model, and also to the full-blown DEX decentralized exchange model. I mean, as far as I understand, you guys fall somewhat in that spectrum, maybe much more towards the DEX than the centralized exchange, but how does that advantage the system, and why wouldn't I just rely on a DEX that is growing up now, or the traditional centralized exchanges that have served the industry up until this point?
Yeah, so I mean, let's rewind the clock back to 2017, 2018. Mm-hmm. Decentralized exchanges were kind of the big thing in crypto, right? They were going to potentially displace centralized exchanges. There were all these issues with, giving custodianship to a central party that was exposing you to hacks. And we were really expecting DEXs to have this sort of flippening in which they surpass centralized exchanges. But now 2 years later, 2.5 years later, DEXs still make up a small percentage of total crypto trading volume. The vast majority is processed on centralized exchanges. And we really have to go back to why. And one of the biggest issues that we've identified is liquidity. Mm-hmm. There's extremely low liquidity on a lot of decentralized exchanges in comparison to centralized exchanges. Right. And so, part of what that causes is when you try to trade on a decentralized exchange, you can face very high slippage, very high spreads, and sometimes you can't even trade at all because there's not a user that is willing to sell at any specific time. So Bancor is really set out to solve this liquidity problem, and it's doing so with this new financial primitive called liquidity pools, mm-hmm. which are sort of replace the order books of centralized exchanges with on-chain reserves. So you stick an amount of tokens in a smart contract, and that token that liquidity pool, the smart contract, can autonomously process conversions without an order book. Mm-hmm. And the real innovation here is that previously market making and liquidity provision, that was something that was always reserved for institutions and whales. You needed high technical experience to set up an automated trading bot to do market making. You needed high capital costs. And what Bancor does is it lowers the technical barrier for everyday users. So anyone can simply stake their idle assets in a liquidity pool and have those generate fees from the trading that happens on that liquidity pool. And they can do it with no programming experience. They can do it at any amount. Mm-hmm. And if we can put everyone's tokens to work in these liquidity pools and really create these user-funded exchanges, then we can solve the liquidity problems that have really prevented decentralized exchanges from surpassing or at least taking a really big bite out of the centralized exchange volume.
But now, let's go back to this airdrop for a moment, because
Sure.
you guys are saying with this single airdrop, you're going to create a massive increase in the use of the DeFi space as a whole. We're talking by your own literature from approximately 10,000 users up to around 60,000 based on the users you guys have. That massive increase could potentially see a massive shift in the future of DeFi, but it's a lot to put into an industry that is in its absolute infancy, still very fledgling, and some critics have come out saying that this move is a Hail Mary pass at an industry that hasn't got those legs yet that so many hoped for back in 2017-18. What do you see as the future of DeFi and how this airdrop potentially could impact it?
I mean, the metrics over the past, let's say, 6 months are pretty astounding. We tend to measure the DeFi space in terms of the liquidity locked. So how many users are just taking the assets in their wallet and putting it to work in these decentralized financial applications. So, how many users are using it for derivatives, for lending, and what DeFi really is, it's a return to crypto's roots, right? Before we build the crypto Ubers and the crypto Airbnbs, we need to nail a use case. And that use case is open financial applications. That is the citizens in Venezuela being able to take their inheritance that's suffering from hyperinflation and putting that into DAI, right? That is the person in Taiwan who wants to put their money, wants to invest in a Tesla stock, for instance, and wants access to U.S. markets without all these high technical barriers. And that's, in Bancor's case, anyone taking their idle assets and being able to act as a market maker in an exchange and generate fees from that exchange's volume. So and it's not just it's not just the developed markets that are benefiting from decentralized decentralized finance. It's also the everyday users,
Right.
where there's all this pent-up demand for these sophisticated money management tools that have been out of reach for technical reasons, for capital reasons, and all of a sudden the barrier comes down with decentralized finance.
I mean, look, and that is certainly a noble goal, Nate, and important work to be done. But let's get real here. You know, when we're talking about DeFi, is it not simply a fad that Wall Street, you know, where the real money is and its equivalents around the world, those big financial players aren't going to be interested in investing in, and that takes the power away from them in a way that they're not necessarily going to be willing to allow? And that's still, let's be realistic, where the money is being held. I mean, do you think that we can realistically get enough use cases out there to make DeFi the approach of the future, even in the crypto space where, as you said, the centralized exchanges still rule the roost?
Listen, we're making progress. First we start with centralized exchanges. We have all the biggest centralized exchanges supporting this airdrop because they acknowledge the value of DeFi. So if you're on Binance, if you're on HitBTC, if you're on LA tokens, all the biggest players in centralized finance, you will be able to receive the ETHBNT airdrop and collect fees from this decentralized financial primitive, right? So we start with centralized exchanges, right? And Wall Street is very important, right? We need both mainstream adoption, but we also need institutional adoption. And we're already seeing a sort of compliance layer being built on top of these decentralized financial primitives. We're seeing tokenized real estate utilizing liquidity pools. We're seeing security token exchanges being built on Bancor right now. So they're able, these sort of institutional players are able to whitelist users. Whereas the core and the fundamental infrastructure is these DeFi applications, there is an AML and KYC layer that enables them to tap into this demand for these type of applications in a compliant way.
Right.
So I think
you see
that's
this
really
as
the
a
key.
plumbing, as it were. You see this inevitably big underpinning and undergirding much of the existing financial infrastructure.
And that's a big realization, by the way, that Bancor had to come through, is that we are just plumbing, right? The front end experience, it's not our focus, right? Our focus is on the infrastructure and the protocol layer, and we hope to enable many for-profit businesses to build these third-party applications. And we don't need a central UI. We don't need a successful Bancor.network for the protocol to be successful. And it's actually in the benefit of the decentralization of the protocol to have the front end decentralized. We call it sort of like a DeFi hydra, right? You kill one of the front ends, another one pops up.
Right.
And the composability of these protocols, the DeFi protocols, is crucial to these hydras, really existing.
Underpinning the whole system, as it were. All right. I mean, it sounds like a certainly ambitious goal, but as we all know, January 1st, 2020 is not the end of days, but perhaps the start of many to come. So looking further down the pipeline, Nate, what has Bancor got planned?
Yeah, so it is this refocus and this sharpened focus on composability. Actually, big sort of announcement that I'm happy to sort of break here with you is Kyber Network, which is one of the bigger DeFi players, has set up a partnership with Bancor that they're now going to be sort of sourcing liquidity from the Bancor network. And when you buy a token through a Kyber-enabled front end or through Kyber Swap itself, some of that liquidity can be sourced from Bancor. And it highlights a trend that we're seeing across the sort of DeFi industry, which is this composability. That some people are sort of stuck in this idea of who's going to be the winner, who's going to be the competitor. But if we really believe that the exchanges of the future will be rebuilt in this fashion, then it's not a zero-sum game. There's many liquidity protocols that can be composed into different projects and that can benefit from all these different liquidity sources. So that's one, is this focus on composability. Another is this focus on pursuing the sort of DEX as a DAO vision, turning Bancor really into a DAO, and where users can not only generate fees off of conversion volume by staking their tokens, but can also vote on the direction of the protocol based on their holdings, and really incentivize the type of voting, because that's been a real issue with voting in open financial protocols. Is people don't show up to vote.
Right.
So how do you incentivize people to vote? Another big thing we're really focused on is really ensuring that this primitive liquidity pools deliver high ROI for users who stake inside it. You know, it's been 2 years sort of tweaking the architecture of these things, and we really feel like we've sort of just started to nail it, and a big part of that is stablecoins. So building these financial primitives with stablecoins in the reserve, so that the base currency is a stablecoin, and in Bancor's case, that will be USDB, which is our new stablecoin that is backed by BNT. So anyone who wants to contribute liquidity to the network can do so in a stable currency and in the currency they want to contribute liquidity to. So they're only exposed to the volatility of the currency they're contributing liquidity to. Right. And even in the case of these stable to stable pools, which is something really cool we've just launched, there's no risk of something called impermanent loss. Right. So it really allows the liquidity providers to sort of manage the risk. And then lastly, I'd say cross-chain. You know, Bancor really grew up and is growing the fastest on Ethereum. We built one of the first cross-chain bridges to EOS, and now we're very focused on 2020 on expanding that bridge to Bitcoin, to Tron, to a number of different blockchains, to Binance DEX. Binance Chain. Right. And so to really ensure that because Bancor has a protocol token, BNT, it can really be a cross-chain, blockchain agnostic liquidity protocol. So really ensuring that you know it's facilitating these cross-chain swaps.
Right, Nate, it certainly sounds like you guys have a lot to be working on, a lot of ambitious goals. It'll be interesting to see how the next year and potentially decade treats DeFi as a whole and where Bancor's position is in that. Nate Hinman, Head of Growth at Bancor Protocol, I want to thank you so much for joining us here on BLOCKTV.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
And for those at home, keep watching at blocktv.com for all the latest news and information. I'm Asher Westrop Evans. Thanks for watching.
For more news and updates, follow us on Twitter.